What's up, duelists? We recently uploaded a contentious tier list video talking about the best decks in the 2021 Edison format meta. Now, I wanted to take this video to dive a little bit deeper into 4 of those decks and talk about why they are so dominant and crushing in the hands of good players in 2021. First things first, we probably got to talk about what happened at Shonen Jump Edison and what's happened in the 11 years after. Obviously, at Shonen Jump Edison, the Dandelion deck emerged victorious. Now, the Dandelion deck is fairly weak, all things considered, especially when compared to these 4 decks that we're going to go over today. And the Frog Monarch deck, similar vein. Although it is possible to win with these decks, they're definitely not your best choices going into playing Edison format in 2021. These 4 decks that we're going to cover today are Fairy, Dragon, Fish, and Vayu. And it's become exceedingly clear that these decks, well, they're just on a different level than every other deck. Let's be honest. These decks excel in both activity and inevitability. These decks are also not normal summon reliant, but can maximize normal summon value and still thrive under Hallmark Noob Crusher cards, Royal Oppression, and Light and Darkness Dragon. They're interactive in relevant ways, and they're favorable or dominant against every other deck in the format. But the meta can still adapt. So take this all with a grain of salt. Understand that these are the best decks right now, but Edison format's a very deep format, and it still has a lot of room to adapt, and there's a lot of counterplay that can be made to deal with this sort of thing. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first deck. The first deck is Fairies, and I'm going to show you guys 2 different builds of the Fairy deck. This build right here is a more resource control type build. You're going to be playing your cards in a way to bait out trap cards, to grind out resources, to get down to that low game state where both players maybe have 2 or 3 cards left over, and then you're going to drop an Archlord Christia, get back an Honest or a Herald of Orange Light, and the game is going to end. There's nothing most decks can do about that. When you get down to low resource, and you play an Archlord Christia, and then you have some type of relevant interaction, as mentioned before, it's just backbreaking. It's backbreaking. This deck has a ton of unique and interesting plays to it. It's built on the foundation of 3 DD Warrior Lady, 3 Raikou. These are your pseudo removal spells. They help you deal 1-for-1 with lots of cards and try to get the game to the state where it's low resource and that Christia is going to clutch it for you. You also have Battle Recruiters, which is largely in part to keep your monster count high for Dimensional Alchemist, to keep your fairy count high for Herald of Orange Light and Christia, and to keep your graveyard and board stocked with monsters. These cards are great. They can be played proactively in this deck. You can crash them, search your Honest, search your DD Warrior Lady, set up 4 fairies for Christia in 1 turn very, very easily. They dodge bottomless. They interact well with Honest. Fantastic cards. They also set up your graveyard for one of the powerful cards in this deck, Free the Brave Wanderer. You only play 1 of this card because it's a little difficult to support the payoff, but this card's effect cannot be understated enough. It's an auto +1 in the best way. It kills things like Brownic, Goyo Guardian, Sirocco, Armed Wing, anything that's in your way. You can destroy Dragon Monster, Fish Monster, Monarch, whatever, and you get a 1700 body that's a light to boot. Really, really powerful card and inclusion. Next up, this deck gets to play one of the most powerful trap cards in the format, Return from the Different Dimension, to great success. This is basically an auto-win card if you ever get to resolve it, and you can set up for it using your 2 Soul of Purity and Light, your DD Warrior Ladies, your Freed, your Dimensional Alchemists. There's a wide variety of ways you can set up with it. Speaking of Soul of Purity and Light, it's one of the best beaters in the deck. It can't be attacked over by any single normal summonable monster in the format, even when Book of Moon, which is something to write home about, honestly. It's also a way of keeping your speed up, I suppose, is a way to say it. This deck, without Soul of Purity and Light, would be fairly normal summon reliant. But you add this extra beater that can come out and apply that extra little bit of pressure. Fantastic. It takes this deck up a different level for sure. There's not much to be said about Archlord Christia. Obviously, shortly after this format, it makes its debut on the limited list. You could honestly almost play 3 in this list, but I believe this list plays 2 to prioritize activity and starting hands. You want to eliminate as many dead opening hands as possible, and dead opening hands are going to look like multiple Christia, Soul of Purity and Light, and Book of Moon in this deck. Those are your weaker opening hand cards, and you don't want to draw them in multiples or until later in the game once the resources have been played. As far as the sideboard goes, it's pretty straightforward. One thing to note is Jaugen the Spiritualist. It's a good way to handle developed boards, similar to a Black Rose type effect. Powerful card. Thunder King, Cyber Dragons, generic, stuff. Mask of Restrict, this deck does need a little bit of extra help against Tribute Summon decks, but these come in and it becomes a wash. You've got DD Crows, Consecrated Lights, your second copy of Royal Oppression, and a Starlight Road, which honestly is neither here nor there. This could probably change. Something to do with this sideboard, again, in a developed meta, this is constructed for the 2021 meta. If you want to switch up cards for the sideboard in the future or switch up cards in the main deck or whatever, feel free to do that. Try out different options. Another card that I think would do fairly excellent in this deck is Banisher of the Radiance. For those of you who don't know, this is a 1600 fairy type monster, and it banishes any card sent to the graveyard. It's a walking macrocosmos. Strong card in general. I think once the format shifts towards more mirror matches of fairy, fish, and some other types of things, Banisher of the Radiance could do really well, since it matches up very strong against battle recruiters and other types of effects, like Honest. Next up, I'm going to show you the second build of fairies. Now, this build of fairies is even more active than the previous build. However, this build suffers a little bit from consistency. It does make up for this in power, inevitability. Where the other build lacks that sort of Christia auto win against a few matchups, this deck has the benefit of the Tethius auto win. If you have a Tethius in play and you draw a card, you're about 66% chance, 75% chance actually, to just automatically draw 2 cards. And it's very, very good. It's a very, very good effect. If you factor in the card destruction and the Reckless Greeds, you could really do some crazy stuff with the Tethius in play. There have been games where you draw 15 to 20 cards in your draw step with a Resolved Tethius. It's a must-answer threat, and you can summon it immediately on the first turn of the game using Valhalla. Additionally, this deck can afford to play 3 copies of Christia because of the 3 copies of Valhalla. You also get access to Giant Trunade, Brain Control, Reckless Greed, some really, really, really nuts cards that a lot of decks can't interact with on a very base level. You're not really afraid of much, as you have 8 different Heralds for negation. These help you set up for Christia, and they also help you set up for your Soul of Purity and Lights. The sideboard looks pretty similar to the previous one, although you have more Thunder Kings. You have a Barrier Statue of the Heavens, and you have Royal Decree. Royal Decree is a bit hit or miss in this format. I'm on the fence about it. I think this is one of the only decks that should play it. But you still play it. You still bring it in against Blackwings and stuff, and still expect to get at least 1 trap card negated out of it. This list is for those who like power, but are okay with throwing a few games to, consistency issues. Next up, we've got Dragons. This is pretty much your stock dragon build. It's nothing to write home about, but this deck is dummy good. Koaki Maro Drago, Not really sure how to pronounce this, but this guy's busted. The stats, insane. The effect, insane. This card is good against every deck in the format. This card is the single reason this deck can compete with Monarchs and plants, and it applies the most insane amount of pressure. This card's probably single-handedly pushed out Nimble Mega Hamster from the format. This is one of the most popular decks played on the Discord right now, as it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. You have an auto-win card in Future Fusion. If this resolves, you're not going to lose. You get to play main deck Royal Oppression, which shuts off 90% of the decks in the format that try to compete with you. You also get to play, 3 copies of Red Eyes pre-errata, which is a disgusting card. You can choose to play Light and Darkness Dragon, White Knight Dragon, or Yamada Dragon. I have 3 included in this, demo reel of build, but each one of these cards has their own merit. Yamada Dragon is an insane effect, but it's a little bit less consistent than the other 2. White Knight Dragon is a fantastic card. It's probably the best card you could pick for this deck. You can reanimate it with Red Eyes. It attacks over everything, and the untargetability is fantastic against both Monarchs, Blackwings, and it just stops a lot of stuff. A fantastic pressure card, fantastic monster. It's also not a light or dark, so you can special summon it while you have Drago in play. Important to note, Light and Darkness Dragon is if you are playing this deck against your friends who, they want to play their Dandelion deck, then you just bring Light and Darkness Dragon and crush them. This card destroys Dandelion strategies that they can't do anything about this. Totem Dragon helps you set up for this. Mass Dragon's a great little battle recruiter, helps you keep field presence. Debris Dragon's a 1-card Iron Chain, or can help you make Exploder Dragon Wing, or Black Rose Dragon if you need to. And 5-Headed Dragon obviously is an insane win condition. One of the cool parts about this deck is you get to play Rivalry of the Warlords out of sideboard. This shuts off a lot of synchro strategies. It also shuts off a lot of tribute summon strategies. It's a disgusting card. Honestly, one of the best cards in the format. And you also get access to, being able to play these 1800 beaters proactively and attacking your opponent, forcing them to answer them, then dropping a red med and bringing it back and lethaling people. This is probably the best aggro deck or aggressive deck in the entire format. The second build of this, along the same lines as the Fairy build, is a little bit less consistent, but a little bit more powerful. This build's also stronger in the mirror match, I would like to note, because you get to play main deck Mind Control and Blue Eyes White Dragon. Blue Eyes White Dragon's fantastic in the Dragon mirror match. It attacks over everything. Its huge stats make it the legendary dragon. I mean, it's a powerful engine of destruction. I mean, there's not much to be said about this card. It's insane. You get the strong Card of Consonance trade-in engine, which helps you draw into, your Future Fusion, your Red Eyes, your Nut stuff. Mind Control can be played in this build because the White Stone of Legend is a tuner, and you can make synchros. The extra deck here is not optimal. Obviously, I have just copied and pasted it, but you would probably be playing stuff like Catastor and Brownic to be able to make with White Stone of Legend. This deck also gets to play Lightning Vortex, which is a fantastic answer to some of the cards the Dragon deck struggles with, namely Vanity's Fiend, Colossal Fighter, and a few other things. This is a very scary deck. I honestly would never want to play against this deck in a tournament. It would destroy me. Just crush my confidence. Probably push me out of the bracket entirely. Let's move on to one of the more recent Format Library Championship winners, James Ark's Fish list. This list is nuts. Coelacanth is nuts. This deck excels particularly in inevitability. You activate Goldsark in this deck, you can expect to win in 2 turns. All you need to win in this deck is a Coelacanth and a Trunade or a Cold Wave. It's a 2-card kill. It kills through almost every board. You can Mistworm stuff back. You can Colossal Armory Arm OTK, since that was not errataed in the Edison format. And you can also just play an incredibly busted fair game where you dupe block someone and Unifrog destroy their back row every turn, or flip-flop frog return their guys every turn. It's nuts. It's really, really, really unfair. This is a busted deck. I would say this deck does struggle with Royal Oppression more than the other best decks do. However, this deck has more tools to sort of engage with Royal Oppression, being Unifrog, being Trunade, Cold Wave, Heavy Storm, and Gold Sarcophagus to tutor them out. And you also have enemy controllers to take control of your opponent's monster with Treeborn Frog as your sacrifice fodder, and then you contribute summon a Coelacanth that way. And under Oppression, a 2800 Coelacanth is gonna be the best thing on the field. So there are a lot more ways around Oppression. This is the only deck in the top 4 that does play Pot of Avarice. However, note this, Pot of Avarice in the opening hand in this deck is not always a dead card as it is in other decks. Subsitoad can very, very easily put 5+ monsters in your graveyard on the first turn of the game, turning your Pot of Avarice into essentially a Pot of Greed. Same thing with Salvage. It's another sort of Pot of Greed effect, but from the graveyard. And you can leverage this advantage with Moray of Greed, shuffle cards back, draw into new cards, set up for your combo kills, the works. The sideboard in this deck is fairly unique. You've got Soul Release, you've got Typhoon, Lightning Vortex. I mean, all of this stuff sort of, it's answers to answers. You really need the Twisters and the Typhoon for Massive Restrict. You also need it for various other cards that may interrupt your combo, such as Skill Drain, Royal Oppression, as mentioned before. You get Trap Dust Shoot, which is a good way to pick a Battle Fader out of someone's hand if you're going for a clear field OTK. Snowman Eaters are for Gladiator Beasts. Mobius and Light and Darkness Dragon, just fairly safe opt-in cards that can help you play into more serious back row. Dark Dust Spirit is a great way to deal with the mirror. Since it goes back to your hand, they won't be able to Armory Arm OTK you by attaching an Armory Arm to your Dark Dust Spirit. And it also clears dupe blocks over and over and over again. Cyber Dragon, great card, punishes Gladiators, probably this deck's toughest matchup, if I had to say. Last but definitely not least, we've got Vayu. This deck is a monster. This deck gets to play the most limited cards in the format, and it gets to play them to the best effect. This is also the best Raikou Caius deck in the format, hands down, not even close. Raikou Caius is a pretty big hallmark of the Edison format. They both have unconditional removal, and they do it for free. You don't have to pay cards to do it. They stick around after you get that removal. And even better in this deck, Raikou mills the top 3 cards of your deck. Raikou is honestly often going to convert into a +1, if not +2 for you in this deck. You get to play Gale, Dark Arm, Trooper, Necrogarden of Plague, Sangan, all to great effect. This is probably the best deck for all of those cards. Burial as well is an absolutely insane card in this deck. Cannot be understated how powerful it is here. Royal Oppression, being one of those noob crusher cards, gets played to its fullest effect. For those of you who don't know, Vayu doesn't banish its cost. So you can continue to activate Vayu under Royal Oppression. Your opponent's going to continue paying 800 to no avail. Very, very, very dangerous combo. Out of the sideboard, you've got Light Imprisoning Mirror. This deck struggles tiny bit with Lightsworn. You've also got Mask of Restrict for Monarch Tribute Summon decks. Goes in Match, another rivalry type effect. And, you know, just some generic graveyard removal. Mind Crush for the powerful players, honestly. If you're not so familiar with the format, I would opt out on using Mind Crush. It takes a little bit of practice to optimize your use of Mind Crush, but once you get there, it's probably one of the best cards in the format. In any case, try these decks out, guys. Crush your friends with them. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the vibe. See you later.